The woman stood outside the small-town restaurant with tears gathering in her eyes, staring through the window at the mother she had spent 29 years trying not to disappoint. In less than 5 minutes, that mother would walk outside, ask the question she had asked every Thanksgiving for the last 6 years, and once again, the daughter would have to lie. But this time, someone else had heard her whisper the words that changed everything. "Please don't tell my mother I'm still single." What happened next was something she never could have imagined. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness can change someone's life and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes one small act of kindness can become the beginning of an entirely new life. Her name was Clara Bennett, and she had become an expert at pretending that everything was fine. She lived in Columbus, Ohio, worked long hours as an assistant at a small architectural firm, paid her bills on time, helped her younger brother whenever he needed money, and smiled whenever anyone asked about her personal life. But beneath that calm exterior was a woman who went home every night to a quiet apartment where the only sound was the ticking of an old clock. Clara had not always been afraid of love. When she was younger, she believed marriage would happen naturally, just as it had for her parents. She imagined meeting someone at the right time, falling in love, building a home, and someday hearing children running through the hallway. But life had not followed the plan. A relationship she had trusted ended painfully after her fiancé admitted that he had never truly wanted the future they had planned. After that, Clara stopped believing that someone could choose her and stay. Her mother, Margaret, didn't know the whole story. She only knew that her daughter was still single. Every family gathering became a painful reminder. Margaret would ask innocent questions about whether Clara was seeing anyone, whether there was someone special at work, or whether she had considered joining a dating service. Clara always laughed and changed the subject, but every question felt like another small crack in her heart. That evening, Margaret was visiting from Pennsylvania. She had arrived early for Clara's birthday weekend, and Clara had planned a small dinner at a cozy restaurant near downtown. But just before they entered, Clara noticed an elderly man sitting alone near the window. He looked exhausted, his gray coat slightly damp from the rain, and beside him was a worn leather briefcase. Clara suddenly panicked when she saw her mother approaching from across the parking lot. She stepped behind a pillar and whispered desperately, "Please don't tell my mother I'm still single." The elderly man heard her. He looked up from his table, studied her tearful face for a moment, and then did something Clara never expected. He stood, walked toward her, and quietly told her that if she needed help, he would help her. Clara thought he was joking. Instead, the stranger introduced himself as Thomas Reed, a retired teacher who had spent 40 years helping young people find their confidence. He explained that he had overheard her and understood exactly what it felt like to disappoint someone you loved. When Margaret arrived, Thomas made a decision that would change 3 lives. He smiled warmly and introduced himself as an old friend of Clara's family. Clara was stunned, but Thomas calmly played along, telling Margaret that Clara had been talking about her mother for weeks and that he had always admired the way Clara cared for her family. Margaret smiled, surprised that her daughter had apparently kept such a friendship secret. But the unexpected part came later. Instead of pretending to be Clara's boyfriend, Thomas told Margaret the truth. He explained that Clara was not failing at life simply because she was unmarried. He told her that sometimes people carry invisible wounds, and that the greatest gift a mother can give her adult child is not pressure, but patience. Margaret's expression slowly changed. She looked at Clara and realized that her daughter wasn't embarrassed about being single. She was terrified of being seen as a disappointment. Margaret reached across the table and took Clara's hand. She told her daughter that she had spent years asking the wrong question. She had been asking when Clara would find someone, when she should have been asking whether Clara was happy, whether she felt loved, and whether she knew she could come home without having to prove anything. Clara finally broke down. Years of carefully hidden pain poured out. She told her mother about the engagement that had ended, the loneliness that followed, and the nights when she wondered whether something was wrong with her because nobody had stayed. Margaret cried too. She pulled Clara into her arms and told her that being single was never something she needed to apologize for. She didn't need a husband to make her valuable, and she didn't need children to make her life meaningful. She simply needed to remember that she was already enough. Thomas quietly left the table before either woman noticed. The next morning, Clara found a handwritten note tucked beneath her apartment door. Thomas had written that he hoped she would never again confuse being alone with being unwanted. He also wrote that sometimes the people who enter our lives for only a few minutes can remind us of truths we had forgotten for years. Clara searched for him, but the restaurant had no record of his address. Weeks passed. Then, one afternoon, she received a letter from the school where Thomas had once taught. He had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The letter explained that Thomas had spent his retirement anonymously helping people who felt forgotten. Clara learned that he had lost his wife many years earlier and had spent the rest of his life trying to give others the kindness he once received from her. Clara sat at her desk and cried. But this time, her tears were different. They were not tears of loneliness. They were tears of gratitude. Months later, Clara began volunteering at a community center, helping young women who felt lost or ashamed of where life had taken them. She realized that Thomas had given her something more valuable than romance. He had given her permission to stop measuring her worth by someone else's expectations. And Margaret changed too. She stopped asking Clara when she would get married. Instead, she asked about her dreams, her work, her happiness, and the little things that made her smile. 1 year later, Clara met a man named Nathan at the community center. There was no dramatic proposal, no perfect first date, and no instant promise of forever. There was simply friendship, patience, laughter, and two people slowly learning to trust again. For the first time, Clara didn't feel like she needed someone to rescue her from loneliness. She simply wanted someone to walk beside her. And when Nathan eventually asked her to marry him, Clara didn't call her mother in fear. She called her with joy. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach people who may be quietly struggling with loneliness, rejection, or the fear that they are not enough. Before the story ends, comment, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe one small act of compassion can make a difference. Clara never forgot Thomas Reed. She never forgot the stranger who heard her weakest moment and chose not to judge her. He could have walked away. Instead, he gave her something she desperately needed, a reminder that her life did not have to follow anyone else's timeline. Sometimes, the greatest unexpected gift is not finding the person we have been searching for. Sometimes it is finding ourselves again. And sometimes, one kind stranger can remind us that being alone for a season does not mean we will be alone forever. Because Clara finally understood something that Thomas had known all along. You are not behind in life just because your story is taking a different path.